Hello everyone. Welcome to Story Hub channel. Discover real stories of wife betrayals, shocking twists and turns and their secrets. Hit the subscribe button and get to our story.
I've always believed that where you come from plays a big role in shaping who you eventually become. My own story began even before I was born, back in the late 1970s. My parents, in search of better opportunities, left West Germany and immigrated to Canada. My mom was pregnant with me when they arrived in Montreal, hopeful about starting a new life. My dad, who was a skilled goldsmith, quickly found a job, and they began building a future not just for themselves but for the family they were about to raise. As I grew up, I often heard stories about the sacrifices they had to make. My dad's dedication provided us with a comfortable life, and by the time my younger brother, Matthew, was born, he had managed to open his own jewelry store in the West End, a true testament to all his hard work. We lived well in Beaconsfield, but I always knew their journey hadn't been a walk in the park. My name is David Klein, though most folks just call me Dave. My parents left West Germany in 1979, before reunification, and made their home in Montreal, where I was born. My father found work as a goldsmith, and a few years later, my brother Matthew came along. Life started looking up as my father eventually opened his own jewelry store, which allowed us to live quite comfortably. Nowadays, my parents enjoy spending their winters down in Florida. I was a pretty average student back in the day, more interested in girls and hockey than hitting the books. Finding a job in Quebec, where everyone spoke French, was tough for me since my French was only a so-so. Eventually, I landed a customer service job with a building materials company based in Vancouver. About a year later, I transferred to their Vancouver office, where, surprisingly, my French skills helped me secure the job. I immediately fell in love with the city, the modern vibe, the beaches, the mountains. I made some great friends through work and playing hockey. I joined a beer league and ended up on the first line as a defenseman, mainly because I could skate backward. It was a blast and kept me in shape. Towards the end of that hockey season, I met Judy at a team barbecue. Like me, she was from Montreal. We clicked right away, exchanged numbers, and started dating. Judy was easy on the eyes, with short, dark brown hair and a slim figure. Within a year, I popped the question, and after some discussions about our future, she said yes. We had been physically close for months, and although Judy was a bit on the conventional side, we both seemed content. Judy worked as a lab technician, running medical tests for private clinics all over the province. She was proud of her hard-earned job and enjoyed both the work and her colleagues, most of whom were women, except for their boss, Bob Turner. When we started planning our future, we figured that if I landed the sales job, our combined income would be around $90,000, maybe just enough to buy a house in the competitive market. Judy agreed to marry me on the condition that I got the job, and a few months later, I did. We set a date for the wedding and shared the good news with our families. My parents were over the moon, while Judy's folks were a bit more reserved, though they eventually got on board and started making plans to attend the wedding. We tied the knot in a small suburban church and took a brief honeymoon trip to Victoria and Seattle before settling back into our rented apartment. I threw myself into my new sales job, hitting my targets consistently, while Judy continued her work at the lab with her steady hours. Even though our schedules didn't always align, things were going smoothly, and we managed to save enough to buy a townhouse in the suburbs. We celebrated our third anniversary not long after moving in. We had conversations about starting a family, but Judy was firm about waiting until we were in a better financial position, although she never really specified when that would be. Like in many marriages, our sex life began to slow down over time. Before we got married, we were physically close 4 or 5 times a week, but 3 years in, that had tapered off to once or twice a week. I eventually brought it up with Judy, but she got defensive, saying that work was leaving us both exhausted. Although I missed the frequency we used to have, I adjusted to the new normal, understanding that not all couples always want the same things at the same time. For the most part, we seemed happy and on the path to a solid marriage. It might sound surprising, but I became really good friends with a woman named Cindy Wilson after she and her husband, Al, moved in next door. Despite how close we became, there was never any romantic or sexual tension between us. Cindy was a stay-at-home mom with 2 elementary school kids, while Al worked as a car salesman. She had a sharp tongue, a no-nonsense attitude, and a bold sense of humor. Cindy, who was a bit taller than Judy, had reddish blonde hair and blue eyes, and she often joked that Al did the honorable thing by marrying her after she got pregnant. They had 2 kids, Annabelle, who was 10 and in 5th grade, and Bradley, a 7-year-old second grader. Cindy would sometimes call her husband Alvin when she was annoyed, but most people just knew him as Al. He was about 6 feet tall, with curly red hair, a ruddy complexion, and a flashy style, bright suits, a fake Rolex, and a gold ring. Al seemed to think this was the perfect look for a car salesman, and his upbeat, always-on personality could either be endearing or irritating. Unfortunately, I found him more on the annoying side, though Judy seemed pretty indifferent toward him. However, I really appreciated Cindy's straightforwardness, and over time, we became good friends. I also liked her kids. Annie, as they often called her, was polite and charming, and you could just tell she was going to break some hearts when she got older. Brad was always cheerful and playful, with good manners that I really respected. Judy, on the other hand, kept her distance from them, which made me wonder if she was subtly signaling that she wasn't keen on having children. If we were ever going to start a family, I hoped our kids would turn out like Annie and Brad. Things took a bad turn last spring. After 6 years of marriage and almost saving enough for a house, I was suddenly laid off when the company I worked for was sold, and the branch I was at closed down. The news hit me like a ton of bricks, and Judy's reaction was one of anger and disappointment, as if I had let her down. It was a real blow to my morale. I started looking for a new job right away, but there weren't many opportunities in my field. Judy would leave for work with a quick kiss, while I spent my days job hunting and growing more and more discouraged. After 2 frustrating weeks, I was feeling pretty down when Cindy showed up one morning. "Hey there, good looking, got any coffee left?" she asked, her usual playful tone in full effect. She often called me good looking, even in front of Al and Judy, and they never seemed to mind. I invited her in, and as we chatted, I opened up about losing my job. In her typical blunt fashion, Cindy acknowledged how tough it was but immediately started brainstorming ways to help. Unlike Judy, who seemed distant and detached, Cindy was genuinely concerned. She asked me what my best subject was back in school, and I mentioned that I'd always been good at English, especially writing. Cindy then told me about a friend of hers who worked from home writing manuals and was so swamped with work that she had to turn some of it down. She suggested I get in touch with her friend to see if there might be any opportunities for me. "Thanks a ton, Cindy," I said, genuinely grateful for her willingness to help out. The woman's name was Paula Woods, and when Cindy handed me the phone, I ended up catching Paula at just the right moment. I offered to call her back later, but she was on a break and more than happy to chat. Since I was a friend of Cindy's, Paula opened up and told me she'd been in a similar situation, out of work and desperate for a job, when she stumbled across an ad for a position writing manuals and instructions for an import-export company. The business needed someone to create clear, understandable English instructions for products coming in from China because the translations they were receiving were laughably bad. Paula took the job and never looked back. "They're also looking for someone who can translate into French," Paula mentioned. "They've been paying a fortune for a translation service, but what they really need is someone in-house who can both write and translate, especially when it comes to the machinery manuals." She gave me the name of the agency and her contact there, and I asked if I could mention her name when I reached out. She agreed, and I handed the phone back to Cindy while I poured us both another cup of coffee. "Cindy, you and Paula might have just thrown me a lifeline." "I can't thank you enough," I said, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. "No need to thank me. It's just nice to see you perking up again. You looked pretty down earlier, she replied. Yeah, well, Judy still hasn't fully come to grips with our situation. She's not exactly thrilled about me being out of work. It's really thrown a wrench in our plans. Jake, you didn't get fired. This kind of thing happens to people all the time. It's just the way things are nowadays. Al's come home feeling low before too, but I give him a pep talk and, well, a little fun, and he's back at it the next day, she laughed. Sounds like a solid approach, I said, feeling a twinge of envy that Cindy could handle things so smoothly while Judy remained so negative. I called the number Paula had given me and got in touch with Mr. Lewis. I mentioned Paula's name and offered to provide a free sample of my work. He seemed interested and asked if I could come by that afternoon. We set up an appointment for 2 p.m., and I was so relieved that I hugged Cindy, nearly on the verge of tears. You have no idea how much this means to me, Cindy. Just glad to help, she said with a grin. Cindy left around 11 o'clock, and I quickly hopped in the shower, shaved, and put on a clean shirt, a navy blazer, and a pair of tan slacks. I didn't change until after lunch to avoid any accidental spills. I met Mr. Lewis at 2 p.m. He was a balding, middle-aged Asian man in a somewhat rumpled suit, which initially made me wonder if he was just looking for cheap labor. But since Paula had spoken so highly of him, I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. He explained that he imports machines from China and Thailand, covering everything from plastics manufacturing to woodworking. The Chinese to English translations were so terrible that even he couldn't make sense of them, despite being able to read the original Chinese. He needed clear English instructions for his customers and French translations to sell in Quebec. The translation services he'd been using were expensive and didn't deliver the quality he needed, especially since they didn't understand the machinery. He was on the lookout for someone who could handle both tasks. I get where you're coming from. How about we give it a try, and if I can handle the job, we can settle on a fair rate. How does that sound? I suggested. That works for me. I really hope you can manage this because it would be a huge help to my business, and I'll make sure it's worth your time, he assured me. Why don't you give me a sample to work on? I can either tackle it here or take it home and bring it back when it's done. He smiled and said, my computer's a bit old. It'd be better if you used yours and let me know when you're finished. Then we can go over the results together. Great. Show me the instructions, and I'll dive right in. He handed me a thin folder from a stack on his desk and led me into the warehouse, which was packed with crates and various types of machinery. This is the machine the instructions are for. Take a good look, and if you have any questions, just ask. I compared the drawings in the manual to the actual machine in front of me. They seemed to match up, but I asked, how accurate are these drawings? Most of the time, they're spot on, but occasionally they send old drawings with new machines, which can cause issues. I can't afford to sell machines without the right drawings, it's bad for business. I can see how that would be a problem. These seem accurate enough, so I'll start working on the instructions. If I run into any issues, I'll give you a call. This first job is really a trial to see if I can handle the work and if it's a good fit for me. He nodded with a smile. That's a smart way to go about it. I left feeling pretty excited about the potential of this new opportunity. It wasn't exactly what I used to do, but it seemed more interesting. If things worked out, I had a feeling I'd be much happier. However, Judy wasn't nearly as optimistic. What do you know about machinery? How do you expect to make any money from this? She asked, clearly skeptical. I know someone who's already doing this successfully and working from home, which is something I'd really like to do. Oh great, so you'll just be lounging around all day while I'm busting my ass in the lab? Why would you think that? Working from home would actually save us money, no commuting costs. It seems like a good situation to me. Prove to me that you can actually make a living doing this, Jake. I have my doubts. If it were that easy, everyone would be doing it. Remember, I've got a knack for mechanical stuff, plus I'm good at writing, and I'm bilingual. That's not something you see every day around here. I think I've got a solid chance, but I need to give it a try. How much is this guy paying you? Nothing yet. It's a free trial to show that I can do the job. Once I know what my time is worth, I'll set a price. Fantastic, so you're working for free on a job you're not even sure you can do. Wonderful, she said, stomping off to the kitchen. Her reaction really took the wind out of my sails, but I was determined to prove her wrong. After dinner, I went straight to our home office and got to work on the instructions. The English version was so poorly translated that it was almost impossible to make sense of it. Just because I haven't shaved or dressed doesn't mean I'm a slob, I joked back when Cindy saw me the next day. Cindy laughed and asked, "So, what are you working on?" Page 3 of 6, translating instructions for the Heavenly Blossom Model 356K 14 thickness planer, I replied with an exaggeratedly serious tone. Cindy burst out laughing. Where do they come up with these goofy names? I shrugged. No clue, but this is tougher than I expected. I spent 5 hours last night just getting through a page and a half. It's going a bit faster now, though. I should be done by noon and then start on the French version. And you're doing this for free? She asked, sounding a lot like Judy. Yeah, Judy wasn't too impressed either, but it's the end result that matters. I'll know soon enough if this is worth pursuing. Good luck, Jake. I believe you're going to surprise Judy, Cindy said, always straightforward and supportive. After a brief pause, Cindy asked, Jake, can I ask you something personal? Sure, go ahead. Do you think you and Judy are really happy? I hesitated, staring into my coffee. That's a good question, Cindy, a really good one. I left it at that. By 11:30 a.m., I had finished the English version and called Mr. Lewis to let him know I'd have the French done by the afternoon. He sounded pleased and told me to drop by whenever I was ready. That gave my confidence a nice boost. After a quick lunch and some help from my dictionary, I wrapped up the French version by 2:30 p.m. I double-checked both versions and didn't find any errors. Then I changed into business clothes and headed to Mr. Lewis's office. He carefully reviewed my English version, occasionally nodding and making a few minor notes here and there. Finally, he looked up at me. Excellent work, Mr. Jake. I'll send your versions for verification. If the French checks out, we've got ourselves a deal. He then asked me how many hours I'd spent on the project. When I told him it took me 11 hours, he said, I'll have a check for $660 ready for you tomorrow. I reminded him that this was supposed to be a free trial, but he insisted. I don't take advantage of good work. I believe we can do great business together. He also suggested that I incorporate my business to avoid future tax issues and to protect myself from any potential liabilities. I thanked him sincerely and asked him to let me know if there were any problems with the French version. As I was about to leave, he caught me off guard by asking, "Don't you want your next assignment?" Of course, I replied, a bit startled but eager to keep going. He smiled and said, I'm confident your French version will be as solid as your English. Thanks to Ms. Paula for introducing you. He handed me another manual, and we went over the machine in the back. After confirming that the drawings were up to date, we shook hands, and I left with a spring in my step. At $60 an hour, a 40-hour week would bring in over $120,000 a year. Seeing the stack of work on Mr. L's desk, I felt pretty optimistic. When I told Judy about the substantial pay rate, her mood seemed to improve, and she even suggested we celebrate that night. I was feeling much better about our future and couldn't wait to tell Cindy, who had sparked this whole idea. The next morning, I got started on the new manual, which was a bit easier thanks to my previous experience and the fact that the machine was simpler. I finished the English version by 1 p.m. and wrapped up the French version before dinner, 8 hours total. The following morning, I called Mr. Lewis, who was pleased with my work and eager for the next project. I delivered it to him later that day. "Mr. Lewis, would it be possible to set up a system where I don't have to drive in every day? I could work on a week's worth of projects at a time and email the finished translations." He agreed and suggested setting up direct deposit for payments, which I appreciated, although I needed to open a business account first. We also discussed drafting a contract, and I told him I would consult my business advisor. After reviewing 5 new manuals and machines, I noted one small omission but found the job pretty straightforward. By the end of the week, I had officially started my new business, Precise Word Services. I filed for a GST license, opened a business account, printed business cards, and designed letterhead. Following my lawyer's advice, I drafted a letter of understanding for Mr. Lewis, outlining our agreement and hourly rate. I also invested in a color laser printer as a business expense. By Thursday, I had completed and returned 5 manuals and picked up 6 more, reviewing the machines before heading home. I couldn't help but wonder how many machines Mr. Lewis had, as I booked 46 hours that week, earning nearly $4,000. With Friday's work, I was on track to double that amount. I was working non-stop in my home office. Judy barely saw me except during dinner, where we had brief conversations. For the first few weeks, she shifted from disdain to curiosity about my new job, asking questions like, "How often do you get paid?" "I get paid per job. I'm a contractor, so I handle my own taxes and expenses," I explained. She then hinted that she needed some money. "Could you spare $1,000? Things have been tight since you lost your job." "Sure," I agreed cautiously. Even though my business was already bringing in around $3,000 a week, I transferred $1,000 from my business account to our joint checking account. Judy seemed surprised but pleased. It felt good to contribute again, even though I hadn't been out of work for long. I decided to meet with Mr. Lewis to get a sense of the long-term prospects for this business. He reassured me that more complex machines were on the way, which meant plenty of work ahead. Feeling relieved, I knew I could finally relax a bit. On a warm day, Cindy stopped by as usual, greeting me with her usual cheerful smile. "Hey there, good looking, where have you been hiding?" I motioned for her to come closer, replying, "Come on over, and I'll fill you in," feeling pretty good about how things were turning out. As Cindy sat down beside me, I couldn't help but share my news with a bit of pride. "You're now speaking to the president of Precise Word Services Incorporated, Jacob Bar Faltz," I announced with a playful grin. She chuckled, not taking my title too seriously. "Yeah, sure, Jake, the president." "Right." We shared a light-hearted laugh before she noted, "It's nice to see you in good spirits. It's been a while." Acknowledging her observation, I admitted, "Yeah, it really feels like a huge weight's been lifted. I can finally move forward again." Curiosity sparked in her eyes as she asked, "How does Judy feel about all this?" I met her gaze and confessed, "She doesn't really know." Cindy looked puzzled. "You mean she hasn't decided how she feels yet?" "No," I clarified. "I haven't told her how well the business is doing." She paused, taking that in, and then simply said, "Oh." I reminded her, "Cindy, remember when you asked me if Judy and I were really happy?" She nodded. "Yeah, I remember." Reflecting on our situation, I confided, "I'm not so sure anymore. I haven't lied to her, but I haven't told her everything either." "Why not?" she asked, pressing for more. I shrugged, feeling a bit uneasy. "I don't know. I just have this feeling that something's off." After a thoughtful moment, I posed a hypothetical question. "If you were in my shoes, making good money, would you tell Al?" Cindy thought about it, then replied, "Jake, that's a tough one. We live off Al's commissions, and it's not always easy. I'd hate to think he'd keep something like that from me." I voiced my concern. Yeah, that's what's bothering me. I'm holding back from Judy, and I can't quite figure out why. Cindy didn't hesitate. That's simple, you don't trust her. You think so? I asked, needing her confirmation. She nodded, confident in her assessment. I'm sure of it. I can tell something's off between you two, and I don't think it's on your end. Curious, I asked, what makes you say that? Cindy was straightforward. I know you, Jake, you're a no-nonsense, straightforward kind of guy. I've noticed how Judy treats you when she thinks no one's watching. It's like she believes she married beneath her. I don't know why, but that's how it comes across. I murmured, deep in thought, her parents. Cindy asked, what about them? I explained, they don't think much of me. Maybe that's starting to rub off on her. Cindy scoffed, are her parents royalty or something? No, I said with a hint of sarcasm. Her dad's a city employee, and her mom works part-time at a market. Definitely not royalty. Cindy, clearly frustrated, advised, then they should be grateful she married someone who treats her well. You deserve better. I sighed, pondering, maybe they had higher expectations for her. Leaning back, Cindy asked, so, what now? I confessed, I'm not sure. I still love her, but it feels like she's given up on me. I really hope I'm wrong. Cindy replied softly, I hope so too, Jake. Even though there were no clear signs that Judy was cheating, I couldn't help but worry. A few weeks later, she mentioned having to work overtime because of a reorganization at the lab. It felt like we were drifting apart, and it saddened me. I was nearing 28, and we still hadn't started a family, and I began to wonder if we ever would. I cut back on working late at night so I could spend more time with Judy, hoping we could reconnect. I also started contributing $800 to $1,000 a week to our joint account, explaining that the business was now stable. Despite the better financial situation, our relationship stayed distant. We were only making love once or twice a week, and no matter what I did, I couldn't seem to change that. Meanwhile, my business with Mr. Lewis was booming. He frequently praised the quality of my work, and as I became more efficient, I started finding time for myself. Occasionally, I'd take a break to enjoy lunch out or grab a beer at the local bar. After that intense conversation with Cindy a few weeks back, we hadn't seen much of each other until I started inviting her over for morning coffee. It became our daily ritual, a time to talk openly without the worry of being overheard. One day, Cindy asked, how's Judy? Same, distant, I replied. Do you think you two will make it? I want to keep trying, but I'm not sure, I admitted. Both of you need to try for it to work, she pointed out. Yeah, I know. Then she paused, and with a serious tone, she said, Jake, she's cheating on you. I froze. Cindy would never joke about something like that. You know this? I asked quietly. Yeah, I know. With who? I asked, my voice trembling. Her boss, Turnbull. How long? I asked, feeling a cold numbness settle in. Not long with him, but he's not the first. What? Who else? I found out Al slept with her a few months ago. Holy crap. Anyone else? I don't know, but one's enough, isn't it? Yeah, more than enough, I said, trying to process it all. I'm going to kick Al out. I'm done with him. He's done this before, and if I let it slide, he'll do it again. I'm looking for a job before I leave him. I won't let my kids live in poverty. Jesus, Cindy, can this get any worse? I groaned, feeling the weight of it all. I remember you asking me something similar when you lost your job and Judy gave you hell for it, she reminded me. What a mess, I said, feeling utterly frustrated. Yeah, she agreed. Well, I guess I'll be rethinking my financial plans. No way am I giving Judy anything after this. She can go live with her boss. Can't blame you. Just don't do anything that'll land you in jail. I need you for my morning coffee, she joked, trying to lighten the mood. Maybe we should both kick them out and move in together, I said, half joking. You're forgetting something, Jake, the kids. No, I'm not. If they don't come with us, the deal's off, I joked back, trying to lift the heaviness of the moment. Cindy laughed, but I could see the tears welling up in her eyes. We both needed a break from the heaviness of the situation, so we shared a laugh. It felt good to have someone to talk to. We decided to set aside our spouse problems for the day. I had work to finish, and I needed to figure out how to cope with living with Judy until I decided what to do. Surprisingly, I felt more emotionally detached than anything, more disappointed than angry. I even started wondering how many others there had been besides Al and her boss. That evening, I acted as if nothing had changed, though it took me longer than usual to fall asleep. My mind kept racing with thoughts about what to do next, and I realized I needed proof, not that I doubted Cindy, but I wanted to see it for myself. The next morning, Judy claimed she had to work late again, which I suspected meant she was seeing her boss. I called Cindy, borrowed her car, and staked out the clinic parking lot. Sure enough, Judy came out with a tall man in a sharp suit. They got into a Mercedes, and I followed them to a hotel. I watched as they checked in, each carrying a small overnight bag. I took several pictures, confirming what I needed to know. I returned Cindy's car and filled her in on what I had witnessed. She hugged me tightly and advised me to cool off and think things through before confronting Judy. We agreed to talk more the next day. The following morning, Cindy and I had a chance to discuss our next steps before the kids got home. I was furious and deeply hurt by Judy's betrayal, but I knew one thing for sure, the marriage was over. There was no doubt about that. I asked Cindy how she had found out. She explained that gossip had made its way through mutual acquaintances. One of Judy's co-workers noticed the affair with her boss, and eventually, word reached Cindy through a chain of people who knew we were neighbors. Cindy added that quite a few people were aware of Judy's affair. When I asked how she found out about Al and Judy, Cindy said it was through a nosy neighbor who noticed Al visiting my house when I was away. I guess Judy fell for his talk about being a big shot at work, Cindy said, shaking her head. Cindy then asked if Judy's boss, Turnbull, was married. I confirmed that he was, but I didn't know much else. Cindy grabbed my phone book, looked up his number, and called. "Hello, is this Mrs. Richard Turnbull?" Cindy asked. After a brief silence, she apologized, pretending she had the wrong number, and hung up, giving me a knowing smile. "He's married, and they don't have any kids," Cindy confirmed. I shook my head, once again amazed by how sharp she was. No wonder I could never pull anything over on her. We sat quietly for a while, both lost in thought. "I think we should take a trip to City Hall, Jake. I'd like to see who owns the clinic property," she suggested. "What's on your mind?" I asked. "You might find some leverage. A title search can reveal interesting things. Let's go if you have the time." "All the time in the world," I smiled. 10 minutes and $10 later, we discovered that the clinic's property title was under Mrs. Diane Turnbull's name, matching the home address of Robert Turnbull. "Looks like Mrs. Turnbull holds the real power here," Cindy said with a smirk. "So, Loverboy's wife owns the building, and maybe he's just the manager," I guessed. "Exactly. I'll bet Judy doesn't know that. If he's playing her, she's in for a rude awakening when you dump her," I replied. "Ain't that a shame?" Cindy chuckled. We left City Hall and decided to grab lunch together. Being with Cindy always lifted my spirits. We avoided talking about our personal issues until we were back at the townhouse. "So, what's next?" I wondered aloud. "Did you take the pictures I suggested?" Cindy asked. "Yeah," I said, pulling out my camera and connecting it to my computer. We went through the photos together. These shots at the hotel desk and elevator don't leave much to the imagination. You could hire a private investigator or detective for more evidence, but it probably isn't worth it. Whether you divorce her for infidelity or irreconcilable differences, the outcome will be the same. Save your money and prepare for the worst, Cindy advised. I never thought it would come to this, I said, shaking my head. No one ever does. I didn't think Al would cheat on me either, but he did, more than once. I'm just stuck for now, needing a job before I can leave him and provide for the kids, Cindy said. I've been thinking about something, I started cautiously. Hear me out with an open mind. I'll try, she replied, giving me her full attention. The other day, I joked about us moving in together with the kids, but the more I think about it, the more I like the idea. My income will exceed $125,000 this year. I'm doing well with work, and I could buy a 4-bedroom house in the same school district. You and the kids could move in as tenants until you find a job you like, no strings attached, I proposed. That's a really kind offer, Jake, but it wouldn't be fair to you. What about your personal life and future? You don't want to stay single forever, do you? She asked, her concern evident. No, but it doesn't have to be permanent. If you find a job and decide to move out, you can. At least you'd have a stable environment for you and the kids in the meantime, I explained. Jake, you're a great guy, but what if I do move out? What will you do with a big house then? She asked, still concerned. I shrugged. Maybe you won't want to move out, I said, my tone almost clinging. Cindy's eyes widened in surprise. Are you saying you have feelings for me? I nodded. Yeah, I guess I am. Sorry if that complicates things. Oh, Jake, don't do this to me, she said, clearly torn. Do what? I asked with a slight smile, trying to lighten the mood. Don't mess with my head. This is too much. I haven't even kicked Al out yet, and now you're telling me this? It's not fair, she said, her frustration evident. I know, but what they did to us wasn't fair either. This isn't about fairness, it's about what we both know deep down. If you don't feel the same way, just say so, I replied, bracing myself for her response. Cindy sat in silence for a moment, tears welling up in her eyes. She got up and began pacing around the kitchen and living room, shaking her head and mumbling to herself. I took it as a sign that she was processing everything, not outright rejecting me or getting angry, but uncertain. Damn you, Jake, Cindy finally said as she walked toward me. How could you? Then, without another word, she wrapped her arms around me, pulling me into a tight embrace. When she finally let go, I stood up and hugged her back. Can I take that as a yes, then? I asked, hopeful. Of course. How could I say no to you, she replied, wiping away her tears but managing a smile. No strings, Cindy. If it works out, great. If not, there's no pressure, I reassured her. She looked deeply into my eyes and said, I'll make sure it works, before starting to cry again. I felt a renewed sense of hope that we could both get through the tough times ahead and come out stronger on the other side. Following Don Simmons' advice, I hired a family law firm and retained Marty Kinsey, a sharp lawyer with a reputation for fiercely protecting his clients' interests. I decided not to hide my new income during the divorce. I'd be upfront if necessary, but Marty and I agreed to negotiate hard to avoid alimony. He suggested a bluff, proposing that we offer Judy a split of our current assets with no alimony, betting that she'd accept without knowing about my new business. I told Marty I'd serve Judy the papers soon, and he prepared the documents. The next week passed without any major incidents, though Judy had 2 more overtime sessions. Marty called to confirm that everything was ready, so I called Cindy. It's D-Day, Cindy. I have the papers and need to figure out the best way to deliver them. Want to come over? Sure, I'll be right there. Get the coffee ready. We chatted over coffee before I laid out my plan. Tonight, I'm going to confront Judy, tell her I know about Turnbull, and hand her the divorce papers. If she resists, I'll show her the photos and mention the witnesses. I'll also remind her that Mrs. Turnbull doesn't know about the affair, which could push her to agree. If things get ugly, I'll move out, and we can fight it out legally. Have you packed a bag? Cindy asked. Not yet, but I will before she gets home. No overtime tonight, I said with a smirk. Cindy kissed me lightly and hugged me. Good luck. Let me know how it goes. Once this is over, we'll figure out how to handle Al, which is going to be tougher. We both knew Al wouldn't take things quietly, so Cindy planned to stay in their townhouse until things settled down. I even loaned her enough money to cover Marty's retainer, and we decided to tackle our situations together. That evening, after our usual dinner routine, I told Judy we needed to talk. She immediately tensed up, probably expecting another "we're not close" conversation. Enough talk, Judy. I know about your affair with Robert Turnbull. Since you don't respect me or our marriage, I'm divorcing you. Here are the papers, I said, surprisingly calm and composed, even to myself. The look of shock on her face was priceless. She gasped, struggling to catch her breath, coughing as she tried to find the words. "How," was all she managed to say. "You weren't exactly discreet. Plenty of people, including your coworkers, knew about the affair." "Oh God, Jake, I'm so sorry. I wish I could say something more. I'm just so sorry." I shrugged, keeping my composure. "I'm proposing a 50-50 split. We can sell the townhouse and split the equity, or you can buy me out. I won't be living here again." My voice remained steady and clear. Judy nodded, barely able to look at me. "That's fair," she murmured. I couldn't help but ask why she hadn't come clean sooner. I half expected some excuse, but she didn't offer one. "I thought Robert would give me a better life. He's successful, and I believed he could offer more than you could." I considered shattering her illusion but remembered Marty's advice, "Don't overplay your hand." Instead, I simply said, "I hope you find happiness." "Clearly, you weren't happy with me." "It wasn't you, Jake. You were always good to me. I just wanted more out of life than you could give," she admitted quietly. "An upgrade," I muttered. "Maybe. Robert is wealthy, and I thought he'd provide a better life after his divorce." "He's married?" I feigned surprise. Judy nodded, looking ashamed. "I'm not proud of it. We cheated, but we were good together," she said, her voice trailing off. "I'm moving out, Judy. I'll stay in a motel until I find a place. If you agree to the settlement, the papers are here. You might want to consult a lawyer," I said, hoping she'd go along with the offer. "No, I won't fight it. I hurt you, and I'm to blame. 50-50 is fair." "I'll sign the papers tonight," she said, still avoiding eye contact. When I returned with my bag, she seemed surprised that I was already packed but said nothing. She handed me the signed papers, and I double-checked them before slipping them into my pocket. "I'll come by tomorrow to get the rest of my things and my computer files," I told her. "Of course. This is still your house, Jake." She finally looked at me, her sadness almost making me reconsider. I kissed her cheek and said, "Goodbye, Judy," then quietly left. I had won my freedom but lost what I once hoped would be my future. It felt like a hollow victory, but I knew I couldn't stay with her after what she'd done. At the motel, I called Marty the next morning and told her how everything had gone. She was pleased, no drama, just a quiet end to my marriage. I thanked her and hung up. I dropped off the papers on my way back to the house, realizing it no longer felt like home. I gathered my clothes and personal items, leaving behind anything else. Judy could keep the photos, and we'd split the furniture later. In my office, I reflected on the end of an 8-year chapter of my life. Though I didn't feel great about it, I knew I had to move on. Thinking of Cindy lifted my spirits. I started downloading my files to my new laptop, a task that would take most of the morning. I informed Mr. Lewis that I needed a week off due to personal issues, and he was understanding. I promised to catch up the following week. Working from the motel wouldn't be ideal, but it was manageable. I missed my morning coffee with Cindy, but we were being cautious until she served Al with divorce papers. We met at an espresso shack on Friday and parked in a quiet lot to talk. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "Okay. I'm not looking forward to telling Al. I'll do it in the morning after the kids go to school, it's the only time we're alone," Cindy replied. "Marty advised me not to force him out if there's no other place for him to stay, but I'm not sharing a bed with him any longer than I have to," Cindy said, her voice firm. "What about the kids? When do you plan on telling them?" I asked. "Assuming Al will be gone by the time they get home, I'll tell them then," Cindy replied. "Do you think they can handle it?" I asked, concerned. "Annie will be okay, but I found out something that seals it for Al," Cindy said, pausing to take a sip of her latte. "Annie got into an argument with a classmate, and the girl said her dad was a regular visitor at her friend's mom's house. The mom's name is Mimi Tramont, a divorcee. Annie got upset, but the girl stood her ground and even told Annie to ask the mom if she didn't believe it." Cindy looked defeated, a vulnerability I hadn't seen in her before. "How's Annie handling it?" I asked gently. "I calmed her down and told her not to believe everything she hears, but I think she knows. She's only 10, but kids grow up fast. I'm really sorry, Cindy. It's so hard on them. Telling the kids that I'm leaving their father won't be easy. They'll still see him, but it's going to hurt," I said, understanding that Cindy wasn't planning to deny Al visitation. After a pause, Cindy added, "They've asked about you, you know." "Really? That's surprising. They like you a lot. Having you around will help them adjust. You're more of a father figure to them than anyone else." "Thanks. I'm looking forward to that and to being with you," I said, feeling a bit more hopeful about the future. She reached across the table and took my hand. "You mentioned wanting to talk, what's on your mind?" "I want you to come with me to see a house I'm thinking of buying. I'd like your opinion since you and the kids will be living there too." "Sure, let's do it. I could use the distraction," she agreed with a weak smile. At 11 a.m., we met the real estate agent at the house. I showed Cindy the rooms and pointed out the areas that needed work. It wasn't a luxury home, but it had enough space, private bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, and a basement that could be used for storage or a playroom for the kids. "I like it," Cindy said, nodding in approval. "It needs some work, but nothing we can't handle. There's plenty of space for the kids, and the basement could be their playroom. If you're looking for my approval, you've got it." "Great. Let's make an offer and see what happens. It's been on the market for 4 months, so we might be able to get a good deal." We told the agent we were ready to make an offer, and he seemed thrilled, probably because of the slow market. I made a low offer, expecting a counter, hoping to gauge how desperate the sellers were. The fact that the house was empty suggested they might be carrying 2 mortgages. Afterward, Cindy offered to buy lunch, so we stopped at a sushi bar. She joked that Al would never eat there, and I laughed, glad to see her sense of humor returning, even if it might be temporary until she faced Al. The weekend at the motel was lonely. Judy was out of my life, and even though we hadn't been close, it was still someone to talk to. Now I was alone, and I couldn't see Cindy either. On Saturday, I took a walk by the river to clear my head and spent the rest of the weekend catching up on work. By Sunday afternoon, I was back on track, and Mr. Lewis was pleased when I updated him on Monday. He mentioned a special project he wanted me to take on, so we arranged a meeting for Tuesday. I also called Cindy, who had heard from Marty that all the divorce paperwork was ready. Cindy was nervous about telling Al and wanted to discuss her strategy. I suggested that it might be better to have someone serve Al with the papers instead, but Cindy was adamant. No way. If someone else serves him, he'll go ballistic. I need to do this myself. Maybe, just maybe, I can make him understand how much he's hurt me and the kids. But I'm not changing my mind or forgiving him. He brought this on himself, and I'm ending it, Cindy said with a resolve that I deeply respected. I wished I could be there to support her. I'm doing it tomorrow morning. I probably won't sleep tonight thinking about it, but I can't let the kids see any of this. I have to face him myself, it's the only way, she added firmly. Good luck, I offered, knowing she needed all the strength she could muster. Tuesday morning, I followed my usual routine, grabbed my laptop and treated myself to a full breakfast at the motel restaurant. I chuckled at how I still managed to be frugal despite my improved financial situation. After breakfast, I waited until rush hour passed before heading to Mr. Lewis's office. But I couldn't shake the thoughts of how Cindy was handling Al. She was strong, but I knew this was taking a toll on her. At my meeting with Mr. Lewis, he surprised me by proposing a massive project, translating manuals for tractors, backhoes, and forklifts from China. The scope was far beyond anything I'd tackled before. I'm not sure I can handle this alone, I admitted. It's a huge project, and I'm not exactly an expert on this kind of equipment. Mr. Jake, you're very good at what you do. Can you find people to help? I'll pay $100 an hour. This is a big job, and I trust you to do it right, he urged, his faith in me clear. He was counting on me, so I agreed to consider it. Let me review one of the manuals and see if I can make it work. Thank you, Mr. Jake. I trust you, he said gratefully. I left with a forklift manual in hand, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. As I drove, my thoughts turned to Cindy, and I felt a chill. I grabbed my phone but hesitated to call. What if Al was still there? If things had gone wrong, I decided to wait until I reached her place. I arrived at Cindy's townhouse around 1:30 and noticed that Al's car wasn't there. I called her, and she answered softly. Hello. Cindy, it's Jake. Are you okay? I asked, concerned. Yeah, I'm okay, she replied, her voice heavy with exhaustion. Can I come over? I'd like to see you. I'm right outside your door, I said, just making sure it was safe. He is gone, she assured me. Come in. The coffee's ready. A moment later, I walked in to find Cindy at the kitchen table, looking drained, her eyes red from crying. Hi, I greeted her, sitting down beside her with a cup of coffee. What happened? I asked gently. She sighed, shaking her head. He completely broke down, Jake, crying, begging on his knees for another chance. It was so pathetic it made me cry too. Did he agree to leave? I asked, hoping for some good news. Yes, though he tried to deny everything at first. When I mentioned Judy and why you're divorcing her, he looked like he was going to be sick. Then I brought up Mimi Tremont and what the girl at school said to Annie, and that's when he lost it. That sounds rough. How are you holding up? Not great, Jake. Like you, I feel like I wasted years, 10 years I can't get back. Part of me is angry, part of me is sad. There's a big difference between your 10 years and my 7, I said. Oh yeah? Like what? She asked, curious. Like Annabeth and Bradley. Tears welled up in her eyes as I took her hands and gently squeezed them. Hold on, Cindy. You'll get through this. Cindy finally broke down, and I held her close, letting her release all the pain. She was strong, and I knew she'd come out of this okay, even though it would hurt for a while. Tell me what happened, I urged softly, giving her the space to share her feelings. She composed herself enough to explain what had happened. She had Al sit in the kitchen while she told him she was filing for divorce. He tried to talk his way out of it, but Cindy was too prepared for his usual tactics. When he realized he couldn't change her mind, he switched to playing the sympathy card, bringing up the kids and their years together. But his act only made it easier for Cindy. His fake remorse didn't fool her for a second. She confronted him with all his betrayals, including the one she had previously forgiven. By the end, Al was a wreck. She had already packed a bag for him and told him to leave. He thought it was a temporary separation until she handed him the divorce papers, making it clear he was gone for good. He left, defeated, dragging his suitcase behind him. I wish I could have been there for you, Cindy, I said, feeling a mix of admiration and concern. No, Jake, I had to do this myself. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Don't blame yourself because I'm upset, it had to be done, and it had to be done firmly. Well, I guess we're both starting new lives now, I said, a bit more hopeful. I'm just glad you'll be part of mine. She looked at me intently. Are you having second thoughts about us? Of course not. It's your choice, Cindy. Whatever happens, it's up to you. Jake, that's a cop-out. You tell me you have feelings for me and then you leave it all up to me? What kind of man are you? She challenged, a spark of defiance in her eyes. I couldn't help but smile, and she couldn't help but smile back. Then she wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed me deeply. I don't think we'll be apart anytime soon, she said, her voice soft but certain. As expected, the offer on the house was countered, but it wasn't far from my ideal price. After a quick negotiation, the deal was done. I now owned a 4-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. I'm almost embarrassed by how easily I moved on from Judy. I've realized I never truly loved her, not the way my parents love each other. Now I've learned what real love feels like, and it's nothing like what I had with Judy. Since signing the divorce papers, I haven't seen Judy. The final decree will come in February. Rumor has it she and Bobby left with little more than his Mercedes. His soon-to-be ex-wife is running the lab, and Judy seems to have lost her dreams twice over. Al is still working at the Chevy dealership, but he's a changed man. His divorce from Cindy will be final in March. He visits the kids weekly but stays low-key otherwise. The single life doesn't seem to suit him as much as he thought it would. Cindy, at my suggestion, decided not to ask for alimony or child support. Al's already down, and neither of us would find any satisfaction in kicking him further. We're financially secure, while Al battles mortgage payments and credit card debt. Playing around has proven costly for him. Cindy and I, on the other hand, are a completely different story. She doesn't take crap from anyone, including me. I'll never understand why Al cheated on her. He deserves the dumbest man award. I love Cindy like crazy and would fight to keep her. When she says she loves me, I won't argue, I'm just grateful for her high opinion of me. I'm glad I stay in shape because I don't want to disappoint her. The 4th bedroom didn't stay a bedroom for long. After Cindy kicked Al out, she explained everything to the kids. Annie, who was already aware of her dad's mistakes, took it better than Brad, but both needed reassurance that they'd still see him. Brad was quiet for a few days but eventually adjusted, as kids do. Cindy told them about the new house, the big backyard, and that they'd stay in the same school, which eased their concerns. When she mentioned that I'd be living with them, Brad cheered, and Annie nodded in approval. They seem to feel the same way about me as I do about them. Cindy always says kids pick up on adult vibes, and it seems like they've picked up on ours. We moved into the new house right after Halloween. I took the kids trick-or-treating in their old neighborhood, and they loved seeing familiar faces, no sign of Al, which was probably for the best. It was likely something he just couldn't handle. I hired movers to make the transition as smooth as possible. Judy and I agreed on splitting the furniture, and I avoided getting into arguments over the small stuff. Al, now living with a work friend, didn't need any furniture, so we made sure he got half its value. The only things I had to buy were a TV for the kids and a few dining room items. With Christmas on the horizon, I'm filled with excitement. I'm planning to spoil Cindy and the kids, though I'll have to be careful not to overdo it and get too much heat from Cindy. She knows how much I care about them, and that understanding has made our new life together easier. Along with the improved sex life, let's just say Cindy is far more passionate and uninhibited than what I was used to, and I'm not complaining one bit. To avoid disturbing the kids, I set up my office in the bedroom between theirs and ours. We've also embraced the perks of working from home, turning happy hour into a midday affair more often than not. As for my career, I found a multilingual engineer who's perfect for Mr. Lewis's project. We secured a contract to produce manuals in English, French, and Spanish as Mr. Lewis looks to expand into the American market. I've got years of work ahead, not just for him but for others who've discovered my skills. I'll need to expand to meet the growing demand. Cindy has become my personal assistant, and she's fantastic at handling negotiations, scheduling, and finances. She's truly my partner in every sense, and to top it off, we're getting married during spring break in Hawaii with our families joining us. Cindy's mother, who's a widow, will be there too. She never liked Al, so I'm getting a fresh start with her as well. This time, it's for keeps.